and welcome to the Confusion to Clarity podcast. This podcast is for anybody who needs that reminder that they really are capable of achieving amazing things. Each week, we will be diving deep into all things mindset, manifestation, and spirituality. Hosted by me, Natalie, a clinical hypnotherapist, psychotherapist, coach, mum, and lover of all things mindset and manifestation. When listening, I want to give you a break from reality. I'm going to share with you the tools and techniques that you need to make your goals reality so you can stop playing small. Hello and welcome back to the Confusion to Clarity podcast. I hope you are all well and have had an amazing week. So if you listened to my last episode, you would have heard me confessing my embarrassing story of downloading the bird app that tells me what birds are singing in my area. And this week, not only is the bird singing in the tree outside the window, it's gone one step further. It has now built a nest in the corner of the roof of my house. Yeah. So not only is it noisy, it's now flying in and out right by my window every morning. So I feel like it's taken it up a notch. So that's where my exciting life has led me this week. And it's also a season of change for me here. My eldest daughter has left school this week. She's finished school and is about to start her GCSEs, which feels crazy. I cannot believe how fast time has gone. And if you are a regular listener of the podcast, you will know I'm a very emotional being. If you were here last year when my youngest was leaving primary school, you will remember me sharing the tears that I shed in the Leavers Assembly. But I have held it together for Nicole. I have felt emotional inside, and I have found myself going back over old pictures, comparing her first day at school to the last day at school and crying over those. Honestly, I'm such an emotional person. I honestly feel it's like those pregnancy hormones never left me and they've always stayed there, and anything to do with the kids will set me off. But she is more than ready to leave school. I'm so excited for this new chapter. She's got a place at an amazing college from September, so it's kind of bittersweet. It reminds you how fast they're growing up, but I'm so immensely proud of her and yeah, just really excited to see what this new chapter brings for her. But whilst I was sitting there thinking about change and ideas for the podcast, that sort of topic fed into what I want to talk about today. And that is talking about friendship changes, I can't speak, boundaries and outgrowing people. So, as I pretty much say every single episode, it's often conversations in the therapy room, experiences in my own life that inspire me to create these episodes of the podcast. And this week, specifically, I have had so many clients who I've been working with who are experiencing feelings of anxiety. Now, as I always say as well, anxiety is the top of the pyramid. Anxiety is the feelings we're experiencing, but it's often everything that's underneath that's contributing to those feelings of anxiety. And as we're saying this week, there's been a real theme around friendships, and we might think that friendship dilemmas, dramas, situations end at school, but actually they don't. And one thing I really see is that friendship dynamics play a huge part well into your 30s, 40s, and into your 50s. And I know myself, I've had significant changes in friendship dynamics in my late 30s and into my 40s. Again, this was a conversation I was having with my daughters the other day, and I really think it's a topic that we just don't talk about enough. So I thought I'm going to put this out as an episode because if I'm seeing it in the therapy room, if it's things that I'm noticing, if it's a conversation that's coming out of my daughters, then I'm pretty sure other people would benefit from listening to it as well. Now, when it comes to friendship changes, it can feel really confusing. Sometimes friendships drift naturally, sometimes there's tension, sometimes you begin to feel unsupported, judged, misunderstood. But sometimes you might just simply realize that somebody no longer aligns with you and who you are becoming. And I think one of the hardest parts is that we're almost taught that friendship breakups shouldn't hurt in the same way that romantic relationship breakups do, but they absolutely can. And I think also just adding in there that we're almost conditioned that friends should be friends for life. We are, bombarded, aren't we, online with, having this bestie, having this ride or die friend. So if you are, have been friends with somebody for a long time and those dynamics start to change, that's hugely upsetting and derailing. And as I've just said there, it has so many similarities to romantic relationships, because with the friendships, there is still the history, there's still the loyalty, the shared experiences, the inside jokes, the emotional attachment. And sometimes these people have been in your life through huge chapters. So when things change, it really can feel painful and unsettling. And I feel so many women quietly carry around this guilt with things like, is it me? Am I being too harsh? Am I expecting too much? Should I make more of an effort? Is it me? Am I the problem? But what I want to really normalize today, I can't speak, I can't speak today. What I really want to normalize today is that friendship changes are actually a very natural part of growth. And one of my favorite sayings is people come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. So when we are experiencing change, be that romantically, friendships, work, I always believe there's a reason for it. And keeping that sort of mantra in your mind, I feel brings an element of comfort. It does to me. One thing that I've personally realized more and more is that not all friendships are meant to last forever. Some people do come into our lives for certain chapters, as I was just saying with that quote. But as you grow, as you heal, evolve, and become more self aware, then sometimes those dynamics around you are naturally going to begin to change. You might find yourself setting more boundaries. You might find yourself stopping people pleasing, which is a huge one. When we start saying, no, I'm not doing that in that way, or over giving, that really can be a time when cracks start to appear. You might just become more confident in yourself. You might stop tolerating behaviors that you previously overlooked because you were so busy trying to keep the peace or gain approval. And naturally, and sadly, not everybody is going to grow with you. And I think that is one of the hardest lessons to learn and things to take on board, because sometimes it's like, why? But we can't make people change. We can't make people do things that they don't want to do, aren't ready to do. But caveating that, it doesn't automatically make them a bad person either, but it can create distance. And I think sometimes we hold on to friendships purely because of the history. And that's the same in romantic relationships too. We think, okay, but we've been friends for so long, we've been friends for years. But maybe for you, it might be a case of, but I've always known them. Maybe I should make more effort. But but they've been there for me. They've done nice things for me before. Whilst history matters, history alone doesn't automatically make something healthy in the present time. And I think that's something we really rose tint and gloss over. And it is a really hard concept to take on board and embrace and understand and accept. But sometimes deep down, the friendship no longer feels emotionally safe or maybe supportive or aligned. But we can find ourselves ignoring that feeling because we don't want to hurt anyone, or because letting go feels uncomfortable, or again, like we've said, like you're a bad person. And I also think female friendship dynamics can trigger old wounds. And this has definitely come up this week in the therapy room. Things like feeling excluded, being judged, comparison, bullying, rejection, feeling like you're too much, or perhaps even just feeling like you're not good enough. And often these experiences connect back to much earlier patterns from childhood and most commonly school. And that's why certain friendship situations feel sometimes so disproportionately painful. And especially if you were, bullied at school. And going off on a tangent here, so many of the clients I work with, the experiences that are causing the trauma on the surface now, often unconsciously, go back to childhood and being at school. I'm pretty sure I've shared on the podcast before, this isn't friend related per se, but I had a limiting belief for a very long time that I wasn't clever enough. And it went back to this hideous teacher I had in primary school, who called me stupid and tore my work up in front of me and made my life hell. It was awful. So, we can probably all think back to stories in the playground where this person said this to you or made you feel a certain way. And I know, yeah, I personally hated school, both of my schools that I went to. Um, and it's the same for a lot of women, but because we're adults now, we don't see the correlation between how we're feeling as grown women and actually the experiences we had as, younger women or, younger girls. And these experiences create lasting impressions that form part of the blueprint that we run from. And it's not until we go into therapy and we sit and we look that we start to see the correlation and can map it back, which is why I always feel really frustrated when people say, oh, kids are resilient, kids bounce back. And they appear to on the surface, but so much gets stored underneath that actually goes unconscious, that creates the actions, the feelings that we carry well into our adult life. But just going back to my notes there, what I was saying, that these friendship situations feel disproportionately painful because sometimes what hurts isn't the current situation itself, it's the fact that it reactivates these older emotional wounds, as I was saying, underneath. And your nervous system remembers these feelings. So even if consciously you aren't aware, your body keeps the score and your nervous system totally remembers. So even as adults, situations involving rejection, exclusion, judgment can suddenly make us feel very small, anxious, or emotionally dysregulated because our brain is going straight back to that memory of being called a name in the playground or being laughed at or being teased. I think we've all been there with girl groups where always tends to be the trio, doesn't it? Where you have the three girls and their friends, and you can't be friends with them, and yeah. So even as an adult, you wouldn't be consciously thinking it's because of that, but often that is the root cause. So I think awareness of that is so important because sometimes we start blaming ourselves for being too sensitive when actually it's our nervous system that's responding to something that feels emotionally familiar. And what's really important, and I really want to use this as a reminder, is that you are allowed to outgrow people. That doesn't make you a bad person, it doesn't make you a bitch. And I know sometimes that sounds really harsh to say, but it's true. And again, we don't allow ourselves to really openly say that, to feel that, and to acknowledge that. We don't stay in jobs we hate forever simply because we once enjoyed them, or we don't stay in a job because, when we first started, the boss was really nice to us and they were really, flexible because we had young children. I mean, kind of contradicting myself there. There are some people, there are situations where we do stay stuck in jobs because obviously the fear of leaving is greater than the fear of staying. But you get the idea that we know we have free will to leave a job if we understand that it's not right for us anymore. The same applies to other dynamics in life. And as we're saying here, friendships. We don't continue to wear clothes that no longer fit us. Jeans feel too tight or my jacket feels too tight, but I'm going to wear it because I've always worn it. So why do we force ourselves to remain connected to people who consistently leave us feeling drained, anxious, judged, or emotionally unsupported? A way of identifying that, and this is something that comes up so often when I'm talking to clients, is noticing how you feel after an interaction with somebody. People, positive interactions should be like plugging ourselves into a charger. We should come away feeling good about ourselves. Even if you've had a heavy conversation, you should still come away feeling like, that was a lovely connection, or they always lift me up. You shouldn't come away feeling like you've spent an hour with an energy vampire who has sucked the life out of you and you've walked away going, that was exhausting. But sometimes we stay because of guilt. Guilt is such a heavy emotion, it's like an anchor. Sometimes it's fear, again, another huge anchor, loyalty too. Sometimes it's because we don't want to upset anybody. And again, I think that is very testing, very telling, can't get my words out today, of women of our generation. We were conditioned, for most of us, to be the good girl. Don't say anything, behave, be good, be nice, don't say anything, don't speak up, speak when you're spoken to. And we were praised for being that way. So we very, very quickly and learnt very early on oh, okay, well, if I'm good, if I don't cause a scene, then things run smoothly for me. And that obviously feeds into people pleasing. Sometimes we stay because familiarity feels safer than change. Again, my favorite saying, we take that familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven. And we are neurologically wired. Our subconscious likes familiarity, it doesn't like change. If somebody has been such a consistent part of your life for a very long time, the thought of not being with them or having that interaction, your brain's like, no, thank you. Let's stick with what we know, thank you, rather than ending this friendship and stepping into the unknown. If we stay in relationships that constantly require us to minimize or abandon ourselves or abandon our own needs, then that has a cost. And I think healing often involves becoming really, really honest with yourself about that. And that's a really hard conversation to have with yourself and to admit out loud. And I see that so often with my clients. I'm like, but I feel really bad for saying that. I feel really bad for feeling this way. And it's like, we have to honor our feelings. And as long as you're not coming from a place of intentionally being malicious or wanting to hurt somebody, it's evolution is us evolving as humans, growing, shaping, changing. So what are some signs that a friendship may no longer be aligning with you? So some signs that a friendship is no longer aligning could be, as I touched on a moment ago, leaving interactions feeling energetically, emotionally drained and depleted. Maybe there's a level of anticipation and anxiety before you see them. Maybe there's an underlying competition or comparison. Maybe you don't feel emotionally safe fully being yourself anymore. So perhaps you notice you hesitate before you go to say something, or you preempt how they're going to respond, and you start to dim your light and hold yourself back. Perhaps your growth seems to irritate them rather than inspire them. And this is a big one, and not just exclusive to friendship dynamics. When we grow and change and evolve, that can become very triggering to other people. Again, that's not saying other people are bad, but if they are in a place where they're not ready, willing, able, open to change, and you are, that can be very triggering because you're essentially highlighting their limitations. You're highlighting something that they aren't doing, can't doing, won't do. And often in those situations, that can be when people project out their fears and insecurities onto you to try and bring you down to their level. And I see this so often, specifically with women. And it could be little subtle digs, or you've changed, or oh, why are you saying that? Or I had one client who'd lost a significant amount of weight, and people in her friendship group were like, but yeah, but I think you look bigger when you I thought you looked better when you were bigger. Little things like that. That's a really hard place to be, and it's really soul destroying and sad. And then again, as I was saying, you find yourself minimizing. You're not being your authentic self. You feel judged rather than supported. Especially those kind of toxic trait comments where people say, oh, well, I'm just being cruel to be kind. I'm just doing it for your own good. And like, are you really? Are you really? Conversations start to feel surface level or performative, and you're kind of going through the motions thinking, I've got to see this person, I've got to keep it civil. And you find yourself being really conscious of what you're saying, how you're saying it, and you're not relaxed in the setting. You're feeling like a performer on stage, and that's energetically draining. Perhaps you've noticed the friendship has become one-sided, or maybe you've noticed that it was always one-sided but you just hadn't really realized because of what we said at the very beginning. Maybe you were a people pleaser. Maybe you just wanted to keep the peace because that was your internal programming and that felt normal and safe for you to do. And again, this doesn't mean that somebody is evil. This isn't us being horrible to other people. It's bringing conscious awareness to it for you so you can decide the best course of action. Again, I feel social media especially can make people very quick to label others as toxic or narcissistic. If you probably see like posts like how to tell this or 5 ways to tell that. And I think, yes, of course, we've all can probably name names of people who genuinely have been an absolute bitch to us. let's be frank about it. There are some people out there who just sometimes just are not the nicest of people. But as I've said to my daughters over the years, having two girls, fair share of girl dramas, hurt people hurt people. So I'd always say if somebody's being mean, there's a reason for it because they're unhappy in themselves. So it's always about giving compassion and saying, okay, I'm not condoning those words, those actions. I'm not saying it's okay, but I understand there's something deeper going on there that maybe I'm not aware of. And I'm not choosing to fight fire with fire and call them a bitch back. But what I can do is take myself out of that situation. So perhaps it's giving them love and saying, actually, I feel sorry for you. Probably not say that to their face because that would probably sound very patronizing. You get the idea. But it could just be sometimes people just no longer align with us, and that is okay. Sometimes we have different values, different emotional maturity levels. That's a big one. Or our life paths just naturally create distance. And I think we've probably all been there, work colleagues who, when you're seeing somebody day in, day out, 5 days a week, you become very close friends with them. But maybe if you then change jobs, just naturally you're not seeing them as regularly as you have been. Maybe you change career path and your the time that you spend together becomes less and less. It's not anything bad per se, it's just circumstantial. I think this is true with a lot of like mum friends that you make. You almost feel like you trauma bond in those early days because you're all in the trenches together and you're all going through the same phase of life, and there's almost that like solidarity, isn't there, of like, oh my gosh, these people get me, this is really hard and I've got my tribe. But as your children grow and go in different ways, those friendships don't always sustain. I mean, sometimes they do, but again, it's all about perhaps the phase of life that you're in, not necessarily them being bad or you being a bad person. And it's just normalizing this, it's okay. So, how can we handle friendship changes without really causing drama, without blowing up, without name calling, or, feeling like we're being horrible? If you are currently navigating friendship changes, I think these reminders are going to be really important. So, firstly, not every friendship needs to have a dramatic ending. So, as I touched on a second ago, it doesn't need to be some EastEnders style slanging match in the street, calling each other all the names under the sun. Sometimes like friendships and people can just naturally drift, and that's okay. Not everything requires confrontation and conflict. And that's not saying that's sort of like a cowardly approach. Sometimes that's the healthiest approach, and sometimes that just naturally happens. As I gave the example with friends at work, it's not that there was anything notoriously awful that happened, it's just gradually over time you saw each other less and less. The text messages got less and less because life gets in the way. Secondly, you don't need everybody to understand your boundaries. And this is a big one, especially I see this a lot with people pleasers or reformed people pleasers who are starting to set boundaries. It can be hugely triggering. And I've had so many clients who've like set boundaries and then had sort of massive spikes in anxiety because it's so unfamiliar to them. And personally, this has happened to me when you've gone, okay, I'm going to do this, and then your body's like, oh my gosh, we're not used to this, because again, your subconscious mind is always seeking familiarity. It doesn't like change. So if you are not used to advocating for yourself, if you're not used to saying no, and you're used to normally saying yes, then you run the risk of feeling like, oh my gosh, this is making me feel really uncomfortable. And that can manifest in the anxiety. For some people, it can trigger sort of OCD type thoughts, your mind spiraling. If that is happening, as I always say, go back to nervous system regulation and regulate your nervous system. And actually, I suppose I've not mentioned that already, if you are in this situation where you find these friendship dynamics are changing and shifting, nervous system regulation, 100%. Last week's episode, go back and listen to that. Regulate your nervous system in whatever way you can that feels aligned for you. So you are keeping yourself in that calm space, on that level playing field where you can rationalize and go, look, I understand certain changes are happening in my life. I understand I'm implementing boundaries, but I'm safe. Because when we feel the anxiety when we're making these changes, it's because our brain is going, oh my God, we're not safe, panic, this doesn't feel familiar, this doesn't feel good. And then you'll be flooded with experiences and memories of times where these sort of things have happened before and had, awful outcomes. So it's breathe, regulate, bring yourself back to the present. I'm safe. I get to be in charge of my life. I get to set boundaries. I get to be in the driver's seat and choose who comes in the car with me. I think it's really important to understand that we are allowed to choose peace. We are allowed to choose peace in our life. And if that means not allowing certain people in, then that's okay. We are allowed to protect our energy. We're allowed to say no. And we are allowed to stop abandoning ourselves just to maintain connection. I think that was huge. And I'm going to say it again. You are allowed to stop abandoning yourself to maintain connection, because so many women become disconnected from themselves trying to keep everybody else comfortable. Going back to what we were saying earlier, this good girl syndrome, especially if you grew up, with toxic friendships, or you grew up in situations where you weren't emotionally validated or you weren't allowed to emotionally express yourself, you would probably find that you developed into somebody who read the room. You can pick up on people's energies before they've even said anything. You can tell somebody's off with you before they've even uttered a word, because you learnt to read the room and interpret and analyze people as a safety mechanism, because you learn, if everybody else is happy, if I manage everybody else's emotions, that equates to safety in my life. And again, if you did it when you're younger, it's going to be part of your default setting as an adult. I would tune into how your body feels around people. So as we touched on before, if you were having interactions with somebody and you're coming away going, that was draining, that's hugely indicative. How are you feeling around those people? What is your body telling you? Your gut is your second brain. If you are seeing somebody and your stomach's lurching or it's feeling twingy, that is an indicator that this dynamic isn't working. Your nervous system is going to tell you a lot. So do you feel calm? Do you feel safe? Are you able to be yourself? Or do you feel, as I said, tense, anxious, drained, guarded, on edge? Because your body is going to recognize this misalignment before your mind fully accepts it, sort of saying your gut knows. But we override that with our logical brain. Oh yeah, but this. Oh yeah, but that. Your gut always knows. And I think we can always sit there and go, yeah, actually, that is true. I can list off hundreds of times that has been the case. But again, that also feeds back into nervous system regulation. If our nervous system is dysregulated, we're not connected into our body, we're living in our heads, we're overthinking, catastrophizing, spiraling, we don't listen to our gut. We override it with attempted logic or fear rationale rather than tuning inwards. And finally, if you have decided that a friendship is coming to an end, then it's okay to grieve that friendship. As we were saying at the start, friendship breakdowns are the same as romantic breakdowns, and we will go through the grief cycle. And the grief cycle isn't just applicable when somebody passes. We can go through the grief cycle when we are experiencing significant change in our life. And again, this is something I say to my clients all of the time. It could be a job, a job change. It could be when your children are, leaving school and your whole routine and dynamic is changing. It could be romantically, it could be friendships, any form of significant change. We are going to grieve that. So it's honoring those feelings of grief within yourself. And even when leaving is the right thing, it can still feel sad. Feeling sad isn't indicative that it's necessarily wrong. If you've sat there, if you've really thought this through, if you've tuned inwards, if you've regulated your nervous system and really weighed this up analytically and logically, it doesn't mean that it's not going to feel sad. Like, it still will, because this is a chapter of your life that you are closing out. And of course that's sad, but you can miss people and still know that they're not healthy for you, or no longer healthy for you, should I say, because both of those can coexist. And I truly believe that sometimes growth creates temporary loneliness. I can never say that word, loneliness, and before deeper alignment arrives. And if you're into manifesting, it's almost like they say the breakdown before the breakthrough. And when we are healing, growing, and evolving, it can feel really lonely and isolating. Again, I don't think that's something that we talk about and acknowledge, because as one door is closing before the next door opens, there's that kind of limbo period where you're like, oh, I do feel on my own, or I feel like people don't get me, or I feel like a bit isolated. But sometimes we have to create space for healthier, more reciprocal relationships to enter into our lives, which is why self-development is so important. Thinking about how you want to be and feel, thinking about what friendship dynamics you do want to be in, because I think one of the hardest but also the most empowering parts of healing is realizing that you no longer have to stay in spaces or stay in dynamics, relationships that constantly hurt you, or just simply because they feel familiar. You are allowed to evolve, you are allowed to change, and you are allowed to choose relationships that feel supportive, safe, and reciprocal. So hopefully this episode has been one that has made you feel validated, heard. I really hope that it's giving you the empowerment to really sit down, and if you are in this situation, in this phase of life, to know that you are entitled to reassess things, to make changes, and that it doesn't make you a bad person. If you're coming from that place of certainty that, as I just said, you're allowed to evolve, you're allowed to grow, you are allowed to change, it is okay. But if you are finding friendship changes as something that you're currently navigating, then, and you're finding you need more support, then do reach out. I work with clients one-to-one all around the world. We work via Zoom. And as I've kind of repeatedly said throughout this episode, this is something I work with very, very regularly. You are not alone. Even if you feel alone right now, I promise you that I've seen and heard it all. And it's always a pleasure and a privilege to support women at this time. But also to know, as I said, you generally are not alone. So many of us have been through this and are going through it, and it's blooming tough. So, as always, all the details of how you can work with me are in the show notes below. I've put a link to my audios. There's lots of different audios on my page that can help with all kinds of phases of life and experiences that we find ourselves going through. I also host a free monthly meditation group, which is on the first Monday of every month. Although, if you're listening to this episode the day that it goes out, there will be a meditation class this Monday on the 11th of May. I'll put the link in the show notes. It's to a WhatsApp community where I share the Zoom links. The online meditations are completely free. They're an opportunity to log on and just take 45 minutes to rest. And with meditation, it's not about quietening your mind. So if you're somebody that says, oh, I really struggle to quieten my mind, that's okay. It's a practice. The sessions are guided and we have a different theme every month. There's no participation required. Just log on, turn your camera off, turn your microphone off, get comfy, and just enjoy some time just to be present. And if you've enjoyed this episode, as always, please share it with anybody else you feel may benefit from listening. If you haven't, please leave a review. You can subscribe so when a new episode is released, you'll be notified. And also you can download episodes. So if you're ever somewhere that you don't have Wi-Fi, flying, you can listen to episodes offline as well. So yeah, I really, really hope you enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to speaking to you all again soon. Take care.